Welcome to Chelsea's Vocation. Chelsea raised 2 children on the autism spectrum, Justice and Noe, into adulthood. They're the reason why she can't help but smile when she recognizes autism in another human, especially a child. Chelsea spent almost 2 decades studying this neurotype as a parent professional, learning how to better adapt her own behavior and the environment around autistic children to both encourage and foster their development. She hopes through this podcast that you might better understand how neurotypical people process your neurology if you're autistic, or how to better yourself as someone who values autistic humans and your relationship with them. Chelsea is a lifelong learner and expects you are too. So don't hesitate to reach out to her through social media comments or the contact form on our website with your own insights. If you're coming to this podcast after the first 5 episodes, you may want to go to the show and review 1 or more of those foundational episodes to know where she's coming from. Either way, we're glad you're here now.
Bodily autonomy means people get to make their own decisions about what happens to their bodies. All people have the right to bodily autonomy. That comes from the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, or ASAN, and I appreciate that definition. Before we get further into the content of this episode, I want to issue a trigger warning. This episode includes the topic of SA, and I'm going to pause for a moment there in case people need it. SA is sexual abuse. So, what if the way we're interacting with autistic children puts them at a higher risk of victimization? And when I'm talking about victimization, I'm not narrowly defining it as sexual abuse, but that is part of what we're talking about today. I want to lean in for this episode on the behavior of those of us who care for autistic children. I want us to collectively and individually consider what happens when we do something that seems benign and maybe even helpful, like teaching compliance. Compliance matters when it's a matter of a child's safety, as in, don't touch, that's hot, when a child approaches a stove. But take a step back and look at compliance through the lens of body autonomy. Does compliance mean the child doesn't have a right to protest or protect themselves from a perception of harm? I think about some of the practices used on my children or their peers and how icky they made me feel, even to observe. Why should a preschool-age child be restrained in a chair for circle time? Why should her skin be brushed while she screams in protest? What are we telling our children about their nervous system when we override their behavior as communication through our behavior? Do we want them to believe their responses are invalid? This is likely an unpopular opinion, but I think it needs to be on our minds. Insistence on compliance may be a precursor to abuse. Consider these statistics and review the show description for more information and resources. Quote, autistic youth are 3 to 4 times more likely than non-autistic youth to experience sexual victimization, and between 40% and 50% of autistic adults report experiences of sexual abuse during childhood, unquote. If we are forcing our children to hug relatives or sit on Santa's lap or stop stimming to make other people comfortable at the expense of their comfort, we are telling small humans that grown humans know better than they do, and they have authority over their small bodies. We may be unwittingly contributing to priming them to becoming victims who should not be able to trust their internal sense of discomfort. I know no one listening to this podcast wants to do that. So what do we do instead? We honor protests, especially nonverbal ones. We don't use hand-over-hand prompting or initiate touch without requesting permission or at least explaining the why. And I know that gets tricky with some of our non-speaking kiddos that we're interacting with, but we need to presume competence that they understand what we're saying to them in developmentally appropriate language. We don't presume the child's methods for soothing and or sources of discomfort are the same as yours. They have a different nervous system. Validate a child's experience or their nervous system response. We want to respect privacy and boundaries. It is disrespectful to come into someone else's space, even if you're trying to do it to be friendly. I'll give you an example of grown-up self. When I was pregnant, a long, long time ago, people would come and touch my pregnant belly. And sometimes it was people I knew, and sometimes it was complete strangers, which was even creepier. But I had an expectation of privacy. I had an expectation of being able to decide who gets to touch my body, where, and when. And that, for some reason, was violated while I was pregnant. Also, don't violate another human's dignity. I know my son Justice, when he was in kindergarten and he would become extremely dysregulated in the classroom, was removed from the classroom and rolled up in a gymnastics mat in the hallway, which he later described as humiliating. And humiliating was his own word that he didn't have access to as a 5-year-old, but he certainly did as an adult. More sad and really concerning statistics. An online survey found that as many as 9 autistic women out of every 10 have experienced sexual violence, where 75% of the study participants reported that their first experience occurred during childhood or adolescence. This is a heavy topic. It's an important one. And I'm really grateful to my guest, MJ, for being willing to be with us today on the show. MJ Lamb is both neurodivergent and a survivor of sexual violence. I'm so grateful that they began sharing their story of survival with the world and incredibly honored that they're with us today. Welcome, MJ.
Hello, thank you for having me.
This is deep, and I'm so glad that you and I were able to have a conversation before this one today, because I think you have a lot to share on this topic from so many aspects. When you think about the things that I was introducing, were there any practices from your childhood or adolescence that might have been similar that feel like they were eroding your sense of body autonomy?
Yes, I do have a couple examples. I remember I was at my grandparents' house and my grandpa was experiencing a medical emergency. 911 was called. I was probably around 8 or 10. I decided that I was going to go in the basement just to kind of remove myself from the chaos and the sirens and everything like that. I went down to the basement and I just kind of found like a cozy spot and I was just going to hang out there. I knew my parents were going to come pick me up soon and they were just kind of dealing with everything upstairs with the ambulance. So I found my spot and I was good and I had like a blanket on. And then all of a sudden, I hear like boots on the stairs, and then 1 or 2 firefighters came down. Like, well, what are you doing? I was like, well, it's very overstimulating and overwhelming upstairs, and I'm trying to give you space so that you can kind of take care of the medical emergency. Why are you down here trying to involve me? And the firefighter took the blanket off of me and started walking back upstairs. He's like, oh, you have to come back. You have to be somewhere adults have eyes on you, I think was the goal. But I wasn't like a toddler. Like I could take care of myself at least until the next hour when my parents came. So that's what you were talking about with like compliance. It's like I wasn't in danger. I was removing myself from what could have been an unsafe situation for me or anybody else. And I was minding my own business, and they just decided that that wasn't good enough.
I hear a lot of things in there that are concerning, but then I also can kind of sort of see the point. They're doing things in the name of safety, thinking that you're a minor, someone should have eyes on you. But your feeling of safety was coming from, at that point, frankly, no one having eyes on you. They took a comfort item from you. They took that blanket. And at first, it almost seemed like a game. Like, well, if you want your blanket, you're going to have to come get it. Did it feel like that at the time, that part of it? Or am I reading into things?
No, definitely. I've had other experiences, a lot of other experiences like that too, where they try to turn it into a game or even a bet. The uncle that abused me when I was very little would do those things often, try to play games. They do like wrestling or play fighting or those kinds of things where it's like, I don't think you should be doing that as a 10-year-old. Part of like the grooming and the compliance part is like they're trying to entice you, make it seem fun, make it seem like you're a willing participant and that you want to be partaking in overeating or roughhousing or those kinds of things.
So those kinds of things, I imagine over time, really erode maybe even your willingness to protest after a while, right? Like if your protests aren't being heard and you're a child and you're trusting an adult, does it make you just want to stop protesting after a while?
Yes. When this was happening, when my parents weren't around, because we would go and stay with my aunt and uncle for a weekend or whatever, I would tell my parents, like, hey, I don't want to go back there, or hey, this is what happened there that I'm uncomfortable with. Can you tell my aunt and uncle that if we're going to be spending time together, I'm not interested in, wrestling or whatever else, these kind of games that they have. And my parents were very much like, well, they're your family. You need to love them. They're your elders. You need to respect them. And basically, up until when I went to college, my parents would make me go to family events, or they would strongly encourage, like, you really need to go see them. You need to talk to people. And then they'd also say, while you're there, you need to hug everybody. You need to stay downstairs and socialize and communicate. This is at the time some of that abuse was happening, and I didn't want to go to their house, and I definitely didn't want to hug anybody. And, oh, you have to. They're family. It's respect. So that made me not want to tell them about this abuse that was happening, because if they couldn't comprehend that it was my choice as to not give somebody a hug, there was no way they were going to understand what had happened as far as the grooming behaviors.
MJ, I'm so sorry that this was your experience. It's hard for me to even listen to, and I didn't have to go through it. It's hard for me to hear as a grown-up, and I wasn't a child who wasn't being believed. And I think about the children and adolescents who either didn't have the language to put to this at all or didn't have any verbal ability to be able to vocalize. I want to think about if you do have the language, which you did have the language, and you did verbally protest, what kind of things would you encourage a child to say? And on the other side of that, as a hearer, what kind of things as an adult who's caring for someone with autism, whether you're a parent, a grandparent, a teacher, fill in the blank, what things should you be listening for from that person who's trying to communicate that their body autonomy is being violated?
Yeah, so I think I can answer both. As a young person, we need to be teaching them about bodily autonomy and also about like how to communicate. That includes body language, that includes pushing people away, getting up and leaving the room, or things like that. Those are signs, nonverbal signs, like, hey, leave me alone, like I did when I went to the basement. It's like, okay, I'm separating myself. Don't bother me. As far as if you are able to speak, it's not about telling everybody, because you need to have discernment about who you tell, but it's about telling if somebody's trying to tie your shoes for you, for example, and you don't want that person touching you, or you just don't want to fix your shoes at the moment, or you want to wear different shoes. It's about speaking up for yourself, even in the small things, and telling trusted people, teachers, parents, other relatives. If you are interacting with law enforcement or any sort of firefighter or something, is just like doing your best to say, this is what I'm comfortable with, and this is what I am not willing to do or not comfortable with. You can also just flat out say to like somebody adult you're living with, here are my boundaries, please help me, so that we can teach and show others how to respect that. For me, when I was very young, my grandparents and my parents would try to put socks on my feet. And I have memories of them. And they've told me too, they think it's really funny, where they were putting like socks on me and I'm screaming at them, this doesn't feel right, take them off. No, you have to wear socks because you're wearing these kind of shoes, or you have to wear socks, otherwise your shoes are going to stink and your feet are going to smell bad and nobody will want to be around you. That's what they told me. as far as like why I had to wear socks. It wasn't an option of you can wear sandals or that kind of thing. It was just like they didn't care that I hated it. To this day, they think it's really funny how I protested about the socks. As far as the listeners go, you have to listen and at least give a chance. If the patient or the child or whatever is saying that something doesn't feel right, or they're not comfortable in this situation, or they need to leave, or those kinds of things, just listening and hearing them. And maybe you don't agree, or maybe you can't leave right now. You need to explain that to them. Hey, I hear you. I hear that you do not want to be at this family reunion. I hear you. Unfortunately, we do need to stay for another hour, and then we'll go home. What can I do to make it easier for you to stay here for the next hour? That is the way parents should be approaching things. It involves the child, it gives them a choice, it gives them a timeline, and it enables them to kind of choose what happens to them, or at least be informed.
It makes me nauseous, honestly, to think about people laughing at your experiences of trying to communicate what feels not just uncomfortable, but probably painful. I mean, I think about my son, and when it comes to socks, the seams, if they would be on his toes, it would feel like it was cutting his toes. And he didn't really have the language to give that to me then. But when I turned the socks inside out, because he would just incessantly pull the seams from his toes, it was fine. That was what he needed. It like felt like sandpaper on one side and knives going into his toes. I turned the socks inside out. I put them on him. We were good. He didn't like the constraints of shoes with laces. He didn't know how to tie laces. He didn't want the laces. It felt too tight. So Crocs, right? Moccasins, slip-ins, whatever we had to do. It doesn't make any sense to me to insist on things that aren't a matter of safety. You're not going to die if it's winter in Wisconsin and you were going to wear shoes without socks or sandals just to go from the car in. It might not make the most sense to someone else from a fashion standpoint or a warmth standpoint, but it doesn't have to. That's why I love when you said, give them a chance, give it a chance, right? If a child is protesting something or telling you that something is uncomfortable, it hurts, even if they're not doing it with words, they're showing you through their behavior, think for a minute, because this is one of the things I love about autistic people best. They don't lie. I have found an autistic child will not lie. They don't see the point in it. There's no motivation to do it. If they're showing you that something hurts them, believe them and find a different solution. Communicating boundaries. Everyone should be able to have boundaries. As a mom, if I became overstimulated by my children from time to time, because it happened, I had the right to say, Mommy needs to go to the bathroom. I need 2 minutes to myself so I can go to the bathroom and breathe. And if I can do that, certainly I should respect that my children have boundaries too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard when society isn't built for us, or when the social norms are so prevalent. Like I was always taught, you need to respect people and you need to just listen to what adults say. And it goes back to autistic children, if they're saying, I don't want to do this, or they're saying, this is the kind of support I need, or I'm just going to kind of exit the situation and go listen to music on my headphones in the next room. Just listen. It's not up to the parent or guardian to be like, I don't think now's a good time for music, or sure, if it's something safety related or it's really important, okay. But like I said too, give them a timeline, or give them like yes, we have to go to the doctor. I know they're going to give you a shot and it's going to suck and you're going to scream. Tell them this is how it's going to work. You've done this before. And then afterwards, you'll get an hour on your iPad, or we'll go get ice cream. But giving the timeline, giving alternatives, and if there's no alternative, then at least telling them, here's the light at the end of the tunnel, or push through this. You have to be able to communicate with them and let them know too that this pain and uncomfortability is not going to last forever. The autism will, but you work around it and you find solutions that work for you so that you're not always experiencing the overwhelm and the pain.
Yeah. So what we're not trying to do is to desensitize someone's sensory sensitivities. I think that's really important, right? Just as my son doesn't like long sleeves, I'm not going to make him wear long sleeves. It doesn't matter. We live in Wisconsin. It's cold. He's not outside rolling around in snow. When he's indoors, it's 70 degrees, right? Like, it doesn't matter. My son doesn't like jeans. I'm never going to make him wear jeans. They hurt him. Why would I do that? So, MJ, I know that you were late diagnosed, affirmed autistic. When you got that diagnosis, did it make you kind of go back into experiences from your childhood and your adolescence and reframe them in light of your neurodivergence?
Yes, it did. It's validating, and it also kind of gives me that power to advocate for myself now that I didn't have back then. So it makes me think about, well, what if I did get diagnosed at 12? But also, it's like, well, I'm grateful that I have it now, and I know what tools I need. Well, I'm learning what tools I need, like my fidgets and things like that, and kind of self acceptance and confidence and advocacy. And as somebody who works in schools as a substitute teacher, I stim in class. I do a lot. I have nervous tics too. I'm not quite sure where they come from, probably anxiety, but also maybe it's some of that like vocalization from autism. And it just happens when I'm in front of the class or whatever, and I let it happen. I don't try to hide it or push it away. I have my fidget toys, and sometimes I walk around the room and I'm flapping my arms or whatever, and it's like, well, it is what it is, and it's not a safety issue. It's not a I'm not paying attention issue like some people seem to think it is. It's very much a this is me. This is what I need to survive. This is what I need to be able to do my job. So it's very much like that self-acceptance and just not being willing to hide anymore.
That is so powerful. And just as powerful, I think, is the way that you're teaching other kids to take care of their bodies, right? If you are taking care of yourself, that gives them permission to be themselves and to advocate for themselves and to get what they need. It's a great thing that you're doing, not just for yourself, I think, but everyone around you.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that it's good to kind of be that role model or example, or, that, hey, it's okay to be yourself. It's not even okay to be yourself. It's great. Everyone should be themselves. Just be yourself all the time. We shouldn't have to hide or anything at all. Just as long as it's not hurting somebody else or you.
MJ, thank you for sharing your experience and for your time and for the way you're helping us unlearn some things that we might have learned in error over time and to do better for all of the people around us who we're trying to support and love. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Chelsea.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Chelsea's Vocation. We hope it was valuable to you. If it was, we'd appreciate you sharing it with someone, reviewing it, and/or rating it. Subscribe to the podcast to be notified when new episodes are published. We wish you the best as you learn, maybe unlearn, and do better for yourself and those around you. Chelsea encourages you to be gentle with yourself, be gracious with others, and be protective of your own and others' dignity. Until next time, take care.